Welcome back for another deep dive with us. Today we're going to be looking at the early chapters of Anne of Green Gables.
Wow, excellent.
Yeah, and specifically we're focusing on Anne's arrival at Green Gables and her first impressions of this new world she finds herself in.
Right.
And to do that, we'll be using excerpts from the book itself, of course, and I'm really excited to unpack this whole journey with you. From Anne stepping off the train at that Bright River station,
Yeah.
all the way through to those early encounters with Matthew and Marilla, and even the ever-opinionated Mrs. Rachel Lynde.
Oh, she is a piece of work.
Oh, yeah, she's a great character.
So it's really fascinating because I think right from the start, we see this clash between expectation and reality.
Right.
Green Gables, as we learn, is a place that's steeped in practicality. And Marilla Cuthbert, with her distrust of anything frivolous, really embodies that spirit perfectly.
Right.
So you can imagine the shockwaves that reverberate around Avonlea when Matthew brings home not a sturdy farm boy to help out,
Right.
but a skinny, redheaded girl with a wild imagination.
Right. It's like dropping a firework into a very well-organized tea party.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that scene where Mrs. Rachel Lynde finds out is just hilarious. I mean,
Yeah.
you could practically hear her gasp when she says, Matthew Cuthbert. You don't mean to say you've taken a girl.
Oh, it's perfect.
Oh, it's so good.
And Montgomery really captures that small town, gossip mill with Mrs. Rachel.
Yeah.
But beyond the humor, I think it's important to remember the context of the Cuthberts' decision.
Right.
They needed help on the farm. Matthew's getting on in years, and the work was becoming too much for him to manage alone.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that amidst all the excitement of Anne's arrival.
Right.
And speaking of arrival, that train station scene is a masterclass in character introduction.
Oh, for sure.
On one hand, you have Matthew, painfully shy and practically tongue-tied.
Yes.
And on the other hand, you have Anne bursting with words and stories and vivid descriptions of everything that catches her eye.
Well, and it's as if Montgomery is deliberately contrasting these two personalities to highlight Anne's exuberance. She barely pauses for breath, going on about the beautiful stranger she saw on the train and her longing for dimples in her elbows.
Right.
And it's this whirlwind of imagination and I think a really desperate need for connection.
Yeah, and that need for connection really shines through in all of her attempts to engage Matthew. Like when she asks him if things give him a thrill,
Right.
it's like she's trying to find some kind of common ground.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's something we all do when we enter a new environment.
Of course.
Wouldn't you say?
But what's so interesting about Anne is that she doesn't just observe the world around her.
Right.
She actively reshapes it through her imagination.
Yes.
Like renaming Barry's Pond to the Lake of Shining Waters simply because it gives her a thrill.
Oh, yeah. And that one little detail speaks volumes about her character, doesn't it?
For sure.
It's like she's claiming ownership of her surroundings, infusing them with her own romantic vision.
Absolutely.
And then comes the bombshell, the name debacle at Green Gables.
Oh, yes. Marilla.
Oh, Marilla's reaction is priceless.
It really is.
It's this mix of bewilderment and frustration.
Yeah.
Like, here she was expecting a boy to help with chores, and she ends up with a girl who prefers Anne with an E.
Of course.
Because it looks so much nicer.
Right.
It's brilliant.
It's a brilliant setup for all the clashes and the unexpected bonds that are going to develop between them.
It really is. It's almost like this comedic domino effect.
Right.
Like one unexpected event leads to another, and Marilla's left scrambling, trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah.
And poor Anne, initially she's devastated at the thought of being sent back.
Oh, of course.
But then she finds solace in the beauty of Green Gables itself.
Right, and this is where we really see the power of Anne's imagination to transform even the most ordinary things.
Yeah.
The cherry tree outside her window is blooming as if it meant it.
Right.
The brook is laughing. She imbues every detail with her own vibrant emotions.
It really makes you wonder how much of our own happiness depends on our own perspective, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
But even with her ability to find beauty in her surroundings, Anne's early days at Green Gables aren't without their struggles.
Right.
And that clash with Mrs. Lynde over being called ugly and redheaded is particularly jarring.
It's a harsh reminder that the world can be pretty judgmental.
Yeah.
Especially towards those who are different.
Right.
And Anne being so sensitive and acutely aware of her appearance, she takes Mrs. Lynde's words to heart.
It's heartbreaking to see how deeply those words affect her.
Yeah.
And then there's that incident with the amethyst brooch.
Oh, yes.
Which is a perfect example of how Anne's imagination can get her into trouble.
Right.
The elaborate lie that she concocts to avoid punishment. It's both amusing and a little concerning.
It is.
It highlights her impulsiveness and that willingness to kind of bend the truth to suit her desires.
Right. But even in those moments of mischief, there are hints of a growing maturity in Anne.
Oh, for sure.
Marilla notices that she's talking less, using fewer of her big words.
Yeah.
And Anne herself reveals this newfound introspection, preferring to think dear, pretty thoughts and keep them as treasures.
What do you make of that shift?
Well, I think it suggests that Anne is starting to understand the power of her own mind.
Oh,
She's learning to control her impulses, to savor her thoughts and emotions, rather than always expressing them outwardly.
yeah.
It's a subtle, but I think significant step in her development.
So in just these early chapters, we see Anne grappling with these huge questions of identity and belonging and the consequences of her action.
Right.
And it's a reminder that even in a seemingly simple story like this, there are layers of complexity waiting to be explored.
Oh, absolutely.
And as Anne settles into life at Green Gables, one of the things I love most about this section is seeing that friendship develop between Anne and Diana Barry.
Oh, it's so sweet.
Such a sweet, innocent bond,
Yes.
especially against the backdrop of the more practical world of Green Gables.
Right, and their vow of friendship is so characteristic of Anne, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
It speaks to that deep longing for connection and belonging that we saw in those early interactions with Matthew.
It's like she's finally found a kindred spirit. You know?
He's...
Someone who appreciates her imagination and shares that love for adventure.
Absolutely. But their friendship also serves as a mirror,
Right.
reflecting Anne's sometimes skewed perception of the world.
Right.
Like, remember that scene where Anne's talking about the two kinds of swearing?
Oh, yeah.
And Diana's completely bewildered because she's only ever heard of one kind.
Right. She's like, what are you talking about?
Exactly. It perfectly encapsulates that clash between Anne's romanticized view and the more grounded reality of Avonlea. It's
Yeah.
humorous,
Yes.
but it also hints at the potential for misunderstandings
Yeah.
and conflicts as Anne tries to navigate, the social norms of this new community.
And those conflicts aren't limited to just her interactions with Diana.
Right.
Her initial dislike of Gilbert Blythe,
Right.
simply because he called her carrots, is a prime example of how easily her pride is wounded.
Oh, yeah.
What do you make of their early interactions?
Well, I think there's this really fascinating dynamic at play there.
Okay.
On the surface, it's a classic schoolyard rivalry fueled by teasing and misunderstandings.
Right.
But there are these subtle hints of something deeper.
Okay.
This kind of flicker of attraction
Right.
that's masked by Anne's stubborn refusal to acknowledge anything beyond annoyance.
I completely agree. There's this tension there
Yeah.
that goes way beyond simple dislike.
Right.
It's almost as if they're both drawn to each other,
Mm-hmm.
but their pride and insecurities prevent them from connecting on any genuine level.
Exactly. And that tension plays out in various ways throughout these early chapters. Like,
Yeah.
for instance, think about the incident when they're both late for school.
Okay.
And Anne chooses to stay behind and finish her story rather than join the other children in the spruce grove.
Right. And then her refusal to sit with the boys as punishment, even though it means missing out on all the fun,
Yeah.
it's a small act of defiance.
Yeah.
But it's so revealing about her character.
It shows that she's not afraid to stand up for their principles,
Yeah.
even if it means going against the grain.
Yeah.
It's a sign of her strong sense of self,
Okay.
which can be both admirable and a source of conflict.
And speaking of conflict, the raspberry cordial debacle is a prime example of how Anne's good intentions can sometimes backfire spectacularly.
Oh, yeah.
It's both hilarious and a little bit heartbreaking to see how devastated she is by the unintended consequences of her actions.
It's a classic Anne moment, isn't it?
It really is.
She gets so carried away by her imagination, by that desire to create a special experience,
Yes.
that she completely overlooks the potential pitfalls.
Yeah,
And yet it's through these mistakes that she learns and she grows.
absolutely. And it's also a testament to the strength of her friendship with Diana,
Right.
that they're able to overcome that obstacle and emerge even closer than before.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's not just her peers that are shaping Anne's development during this period.
Right.
The arrival of Miss Stacy as the new teacher really marks a turning point in her education.
Miss Stacy represents such a breath of fresh air.
Yeah.
A more progressive approach to teaching that resonates with Anne's thirst for knowledge and her love for learning.
Yeah.
She recognizes Anne's potential, and she encourages her to pursue her academic ambitions.
Right. And remember all the excitement surrounding the Queen's class
Mm-hmm.
and the opportunity to prepare for higher education?
Yeah.
It's like a whole new world opens up for Anne,
Yes.
filled with possibilities that she never even dared to dream of before.
It's as if she's finally found a place where her intelligence and imagination are valued,
Yes.
where she can shine without being judged or misunderstood.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see how her rivalry with Gilbert kind of becomes intertwined with her academic pursuits.
Oh, absolutely.
Like they're pushing each other to excel, even if they'd never admit it.
Right, there's that healthy competition there, fueled by their shared intelligence and ambition.
But just as things are starting to look up for Anne,
Oh, yes.
a dark cloud descends upon Green Gables.
Right.
Matthew's sudden death is such a pivotal moment in the story.
Yes, it is.
A stark reminder of the fragility of life and the inevitability of loss.
It's heartbreaking.
And it forces Anne to confront a level of maturity that she hasn't had to face before.
It's a true test of character, both for Anne and for Marilla.
Yes.
You know, suddenly their roles are reversed,
Boy.
and Anne becomes the caregiver, the source of strength and comfort for a grieving Marilla.
And it's amazing to witness the depth of their love and compassion for each other.
It really is.
And in this crucible of grief and loss, Anne makes a profound decision
Yes.
that really reveals how much she's grown. She chooses to sacrifice her own dreams of attending Redmond College
Right.
to stay at Green Gables and care for Marilla.
It's such a selfless act.
It really is.
A testament to her evolving sense of responsibility and her unwavering loyalty to the woman who has become her family.
But it also raises so many questions about her future,
It does.
about what path she'll forge for herself now that her original plan has been derailed. It's a real turning point that leaves us on the edge of our seats, wondering what lies ahead for this remarkable young woman. You know, as we delve into this final part of our deep dive,
Right.
you can really feel this shift in tone.
Yeah.
It's not that the story loses its charm or anything,
Right.
but there's definitely this new layer of depth and complexity as Anne grapples with the weight of her decision to stay at Green Gables.
And it's fascinating how Montgomery manages to balance those lighthearted moments that we've come to expect with this growing sense of maturity and responsibility in Anne.
Right.
You know, she's still that imaginative, spirited girl we know and love,
Right.
but now she's also facing very real adult challenges.
And that's so true to life, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Like as we grow, we don't just shed our childhood selves completely.
Right.
We carry those parts of us forward, but they're tempered by experience, by loss,
Yeah.
by the need to make difficult choices.
Exactly. And one of the most poignant aspects of this section, I think, is seeing how the relationship between Anne and Marilla deepens in the wake of Matthew's death. Do you remember that scene
Yeah.
where Marilla confides in Anne about her own fears and vulnerabilities?
Well, it's such a raw and honest moment.
It is.
You really see how much they've come to rely on each other,
Yeah.
how their bond has transcended that initial awkwardness of their
Right.
early interactions.
They've become a true family.
They really have.
And it's within that context of shared grief and vulnerability
Right.
that Anne's decision to sacrifice her scholarship
Yeah.
becomes even more meaningful. It's not just a sense of duty.
Right.
It's a true act of love and loyalty.
It makes you wonder, though, what would you have done in Anne's situation?
Oh, that's tough.
It's such a tough choice, weighing your own dreams
Mm.
against the needs of someone you love.
It's a dilemma that I think a lot of us face at some point in our lives.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's no easy answer.
Right.
But what I find so admirable about Anne,
Is that she doesn't shy away from the responsibility.
Right.
She embraces it,
yes.
and she even finds ways to kind of weave her own dreams
Yeah.
into this new reality that she's created.
And she's so practical about it, too.
Oh, she is.
She's got the whole plan laid out, you
Right.
know, teaching at the Carmody School and keeping a horse and taking care of Marilla.
Yeah.
It's very clear that she's determined to make the best of the situation.
But, you know, it's not all sunshine and roses.
Right.
There's this very poignant awareness
Yeah.
that her life isn't going to be exactly as she'd envisioned.
Right.
Teaching at Carmody won't be as nice or convenient as Avonlea.
Right.
And she's going to miss out on living in town with her friends.
Right. It's that bittersweet realization that sometimes, even when we make the right choice, there's still a sense of loss,
Right.
a path not taken.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay.
It is.
You know, it's part of growing up. It's
Yeah.
part of understanding that life is full of compromises. Exactly. And speaking of complicated emotions, we can't ignore that lingering tension
Oh, yes.
between Anne and Gilbert,
Right.
even in the midst of tragedy, you know, that rivalry,
Right.
that unspoken attraction.
Yeah.
It's still simmering there. beneath the surface.
That scene by the pond where Gilbert tries to apologize for all of his past teasing. Oh, it's so full of unsaid things.
It is.
It's almost painful to read because you can see how much Anne wants to forgive him,
Yes.
but the hurt is still too raw.
Yeah, it's a reminder that forgiveness is a process.
Hmm.
It's not a switch that we can just flip on and off. And
Yeah.
sometimes pride or the fear of being hurt again
Right.
can hold us back from taking that step.
But even in her refusal to forgive him, there's this flicker of regret,
Yes.
a sense that maybe she's pushing away something precious.
Yeah.
And it leaves you wondering, will they ever truly bridge that gap?
No.
Or are their paths destined to diverge?
And that unanswered question adds a layer of intrigue to the ending.
Oh, for sure.
It makes you want to keep reading to see how their story unfolds.
Absolutely.
But even without knowing the future, that final image of Anne at her window,
Yeah.
whispering, "God's in his heaven, all's right with the world."
Oh, I love that line.
It's so powerful.
It is.
It's a testament to her resilience, her ability to find peace and beauty,
Yeah.
even in the midst of uncertainty.
It leaves us with this sense of hope, this feeling that no matter what challenges life throws our way, we can find a way to make things right,
Right.
at least in our own little corner of the world.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Anne's journey so far,
Yeah.
I'm curious what resonates most with you.
Yeah.
Is it her unwavering optimism?
Right.
Her struggle to fit in?
Mm-hmm.
Her fierce loyalty to those she loves?
What lessons has Anne taught you about navigating the complexities of life?
Right.
About embracing your own quirks, about finding joy in the everyday? And most importantly, how does her story inspire you to approach your own challenges with a little bit of that irrepressible Annishness?
Well said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been fun.
We'll be back soon with another fascinating exploration of a different topic. Until then, happy reading.